I think it's a good idea that we summarize before we talk about what we're going to talk about today, because there's a good chance people didn't watch the sermon. So we need to, I guess, spend some time delving down into it. I guess the crux of the sermon.
So this is the sermon that you had on Saturday about the Sabbath.
That's correct.
Okay.
So I guess the crux of the sermon that we were delving into was that the Sabbath is often pitched as something that can be about making a person more superior by their keeping of the Sabbath, or it can lead to, I guess, that sort of thing, spiritual pride. Like in the passage we looked at in Matthew chapter 12, Jesus is walking through the grain fields. His disciples are picking the grain, and then that leads to a bit of a heated debate between the religious leaders and Jesus about whether he's doing the right thing.
So essentially the danger of becoming a Pharisee, of going, hey, you're doing it wrong.
Because of Sabbath keeping. And Jesus really stresses that the Sabbath is actually pointing to his superiority, his position, his authority.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's actually quite a big statement to make, but it also tends to buttress or add weight or lend weight to the fact that the Sabbath is important, because Jesus didn't pick something that was irrelevant. He picked something that was very important and that was valid and binding, and said, well, this points to me.
So it's important, but without going as far as the Pharisees were, which was nitpicking, essentially little things that weren't important.
Yeah, because in its portfolio, if you will, of meaning that it holds, you go back to the beginning in creation, and it shows a picture of a God who wants to rest and be with his creation, not a God that stands aloof or distant. And as a result of that, God creates them with a purpose, and I suggested that there's a priority that he places on humanity, a priority for them to be valued, and so a very good quote that I read, but I actually didn't quote. I don't know why. It's such a good one. It's by a Protestant, I'm trying to remember I think he's Reformed theologian.
Okay.
So, but he says, the reason why God refrains from further activity on the seventh day is that he has found the object of his supreme love and has no need for any further works. I really liked that. He's in essence saying, like, God has been making all in the first week, what he's, been creating, and there's lots of grand things there. But when he gets to humanity, that's when he stops, because he's found the object of his supreme love. And so when he finds that supreme object of his love, he rests, and he lowers himself in essence to their position, and he's with them. So I think the Sabbath at its core was about God being with humanity, and even beyond the fall, beyond the entrance of sin, God has a plan in bringing that rest and restoration to his creation. And so when Jesus comes into the picture in the New Testament, he is doing the same thing. He's doing works of restoration. He's picking that up. And actually, another great quote that I didn't put in the sermon by another author. His name is Sigve Tonstad. I'm not sure his ethnicity, but it's obviously not like Anglo-Saxon.
Yeah.
But
interesting surname.
Yeah. He in essence says, referring to, let me just find it here. Yeah, he's talking about like when God is, when Christ is doing this work of healing, he says he's not idle. Like, rest does not mean idleness.
Because we usually think rest means idle.
Yeah,
right?
like going to sleep or lying down on the couch or whatever.
So what does
watching
it mean?
A movie.
What does this guy say it means?
So he says he says this quote. It's a bit of a long one, but follow along. He says, "Where is God in the face of present need and suffering? Jesus shows that being present, that's what's important, being present and responding to present reality, whatever that is. If it's negative, then you respond and you seek to solve that. Constitutes the essence of the Sabbath." That's what it's about, responding to present reality. At creation, God's commitment to humanity is described by God's rest. But the reality of disease and death calls for a different Sabbath message, right? In the beginning, there was no disease, so God just stops and he's present with his creation. But when you have disease and death, you can't just sit presently but do nothing.
Can't sit idly by.
Exactly. So resting in the face of crying needs implies remoteness and indifference. So God is not like that, for God is not remote, but God is present. And I really like that, and that's the end quote. So he's in essence saying, if Jesus stood aloof and was idle, he would not have been keeping Sabbath. Fundamentally, he's talking about Jesus heals, Pharisees come in, or religious leaders come in, and they're worried. They say he's breaking the Sabbath. But really, how he responds is he's saying, I'm not breaking the Sabbath, because it would actually be breaking the Sabbath's meaning to be idle in this time, because God was not idle.
To be useless.
To be useless, yeah. So he responds to that need.
So almost to be self-absorbed,
Yep.
and to be thinking about yourself, essentially.
Very much so.
I'm tired this week. I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to do anything. I just want to sleep all day.
Yeah.
Don't want to go to church. Don't want to talk to anyone.
Yeah.
So that's not the right attitude to have.
I don't think so. And I guess we do have to take into consideration there's obviously different personality
we
types.
are human beings.
We are human beings,
Yes.
and there's we got to spend that time resting and being rejuvenated. Otherwise, we're no good to anybody else. But in essence, if the life is completely dedicated to sleeping in and playing video games and just doing nothing, well then that's idleness in the face of present suffering, because there's a lot of people out there that are struggling. And
okay, so how do we keep the Sabbath practically? Because
that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah, because someone might say, okay, I've had a long week. I'm just going to rest today. I'm not going to go to church. Just going to do my own thing. Is going to and is there something wrong with that? Am I wrong in wanting to rest from my hard day of work?
Well, obviously that's where we all go. And like I just said, if we don't have energy and we're trying to help others, usually it can come across as maybe even anger, or we might do things rashly, and as a result of that, put people off. So fundamentally, we got to be rested and in a good state of mind. So it's no point trying to just constantly help people if you're actually falling apart. Like the second great commandment, the first is love God with all your heart, but then the second is love your neighbor as yourself. So sure, if you're just constantly run off your feet and you're a complete mess, then you need that rest. So I don't want to get it to the state where it's okay, you constantly got to be doing stuff. You got to ignore your body.
Okay, but what does that mean? What does that mean practically on the Sabbath day? Right. How do you put a quota on how long you stay in bed?
Right. So
I think how long do you rest?
Okay.
So what I'm hearing here is there has to be a balance.
There is a balance.
But how much of the balance? How do you dictate that balance?
Yeah. And so I think putting that aside now that I've said you got to care for yourself. So I think what that leads to then is, okay, a life that's completely dedicated to, looking after yourself and just caring for yourself and never seeks to help others is actually very draining. That's actually...
Draining?
Yeah, soul draining. I think it causes people to feel very empty inside, and nothing's been more energizing for me than to help somebody in need or support somebody and see them happy. And it took a little bit of effort, but then I realized, man, they really needed this. And then I was like, hey, wait a minute. I stopped thinking about my tiredness, my problems, my this, my that. And as a result, I've actually had the opportunity to lift someone out of their pain, to alleviate suffering. And yeah, that's so
it's almost an intrinsic fulfillment that you get when you help others.
Yeah, okay. Definitely. I think that's how we're wired. We're wired to help others, and when we're not, it's almost like we're a stagnant pool of water, and it just takes in all this bitterness, and it festers and gets worse. So, you asked what can you do on Sabbath? I think that's kind of
but how does that manifest? Because speaking for me personally, I won't generalize here. Speaking personally, I go to church, come home, and basically just laze about. I might read something, or I might watch a sermon or something. But essentially, it's a lazing about. And then the afternoon, call a friend or something. Hey, do you want to hang out? Do you want to go to a park or something? Parks are not necessarily anti-spiritual, whatever you want to say, or you're sinning going to a park with friends. But it's a self-interest thing. It's not altruistic going to a park with your friends on the Sabbath. It's I guess the first part of the day, you could say, oh, I'm at church, I'm with other people, I'm helping or with church or something, and then the second part of the day I'm resting. So you could say, oh, I've found balance there.
Yep.
But is that really? Is that, what can we do? Okay, here's essentially my question. What can we do on the Sabbath to fulfill it to its maximum? What actions can we do?
Well, let me have a think here. I think like when it comes to like what to do and when to do it, it really does differ from person to person, right? Like not everyone's going to be going out to a soup kitchen, but I have a close friend who goes pretty regularly in the afternoon to the soup kitchen in the city, and there he like prepares the food, and because at nighttime, pretty much when the sun sets, then the van goes out under this bridge and they feed almost 200 homeless people. So he goes out in the afternoon to prepare the food, to cut the veggies or whatever, and then when that's done, like,
is this on the Sabbath?
It is on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
And he loves doing that, and he actually takes non-Christian friends to it, and it's like it was actually quite inspirational and motivational to me to see somebody who's, instead of sleeping on an afternoon, he's actually using that time to
be productive.
Be productive, but also not for his own gain, but for others, right?
And possibly even witness to other people.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. And so, I mean, what greater witness is there than helping and healing others that are in need? Yeah. So I think like there's so much potential to do things that you don't usually do during the week, and like we could utilize it a lot better. And so I'm not saying we got to abandon the parks. People everywhere would be very disappointed if they couldn't go to a park. But maybe we can double it up and use it for a good purpose. Another experience is that I've known a group that took out a ball, and I don't know, like that's obviously a contentious thing. Like if you could play sport on Sabbath or whatever. A soccer ball, okay. Yeah. And actually invited refugees from the community to join them, and they just played together in the park and got to meet some of this group of refugees that were really just, I guess
perhaps new to the city.
New, and they didn't know many people from Toowoomba, and so it was like an opportunity to show them support. Like, we're here for you, building those social connections. And then they sat around under the trees, and
that's interesting because what that is essentially what Jesus did, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, among other things, he mingled with people on the Sabbath and talked to them.
That's it. So I think what I'm not saying is, okay, if you just follow this 5 things and you're always making sure that your Sabbath has this, then you're keeping the Sabbath. What I'm trying to say is there's actually so much potential in Sabbath to be healing and restorative, not just to ourselves but to others. Then we'll actually use that kind of like the lenses of how we'll choose what we do.
So it's less of a guideline and more of a new optical way of seeing the world.
A new paradigm, a new worldview.
A new paradigm.
Yeah, because the worldview at the moment is, okay, what can we do, what can't we do? Or what's the right thing, what's the wrong thing? But I think sorry, so you continue, sorry. Yeah, no, so that's right. The real paradigm that I think you see in the New Testament is Jesus going, okay, how can we bring healing? How can I, bring happiness and mercy? There's that quote that was in the sermon that Jesus says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. The Message actually said it in an interesting way. I think it was something like, I desire flexible hearts.
The Message Bible
Message remix, yeah. It says, I desire flexible hearts, not inflexible religion. And I really liked that. Just play on words. Mm-hmm. Good commentary on the Bible, on what Jesus is saying. It's like the flexible heart can, when it sees suffering, it adapts to it and goes, okay, how can I help? But the inflexible religion doesn't change even in the face of present suffering. So I kind of liked that mentality of what is behind that verse. Jesus wants mercy. He wants to help people. He wants to lift them up, not just the right rules.
So it's more about us having that paradigm shift where we want to do that intrinsically.
Yeah.
Rather than having our old worldview and just going to church and going, all right, I have these guidelines I have to follow. I have to do this stuff because I'm a Christian. I'm supposed to do this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's more of a supposed to or have to rather than want to.
Yeah, and I think the supposed to will become a want to. Like
after this.
Yeah, because when you see
change.
somebody being blessed, and not getting, like, you're not expecting anything in return, like that really does something to you. That does something to you when a community of believers are only intent on blessing a community and helping others, not expecting anything in return. That makes a lot of people ask questions.
So should we as a church community or a small group community be going out in the afternoon, visiting people?
I think so.
Working at a soup kitchen. Working's a bit of a contradictory word to use with talking about the Sabbath, but helping other people. Essentially, what Jesus did, he healed people. He sat with them. He was pretty radical in a lot of things that he did. So, is that what it means? Should we be doing those things?
I think
should we be going home and sitting around, or should we be active?
So let's then hit the other question. Okay, so for a lot of people, Sabbath is a time of rest.
Yes.
Right. So I think there's nothing wrong with rest, and we need to have that. But I'm also saying, why does it have to be that the whole 24 hours is dedicated to rest?
So not the whole 24 hours.
Right. Like, would it actually be that hard to say, let's take 1 hour from the Sabbath, 1 hour, just to do something where we're actually trying to bless people, like Jesus would have. He went and healed the man with the withered hand, or the woman who was bent over for 18 years. And he does both of those things on the Sabbath. Like, would it actually, like, take away from maybe, spend 2 hours in the afternoon resting, and then you go out and do something?
How big of an inconvenience would it be?
Yeah. That's my challenge. I think that I would love to see myself doing more, and I'd put out to anybody who's listening that would be like, use 1 hour of the Sabbath, and then if that's good, then go do more. Like, if it does energize you and you feel that, that strengthening, then go do some more.
So it's like that rule of thumb with anything, really. You start off small.
Yeah.
Do it in small amounts.
Yeah.
And then if it works, continue bigger and bigger and bigger.
That's it.
So even like gathering some friends together and going to visit some people that you know or something like that.
Yeah. And okay, so one more thing that I think that's just key to talk about in this is that the central thing that fuels that paradigm, or this worldview that we're talking about, is the two greatest commandments, right? Like, it's love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law and the prophets hang on these, Jesus says. So if that is if that's the thing that's fueling the paradigm, anything that we do ought to be for the purpose of extending our love to God and our love to our neighbor. So if we're at church and it's actually just kind of like a ritual and a religion, then I don't think that's actually in the scope of the Sabbath, right? Because its intent of church fundamentally is to love God, right? Like, it's to show that love that we have for him and to give back to God. And then it flows out to others.
Yeah, because it's interesting, even a lot of the times in the Bible where Jesus went to the synagogue, or Paul, or a lot of the other apostles, it says they went to the synagogue as was their custom, and they reasoned with the people in the synagogue. So it's interesting. It's like not necessarily they did it obviously as it was in their custom, and we're doing our own custom here in the Western modern society, going to church and whatever. Yeah. But their true mission, or their true passion, was every other day. That's what I found interesting, is like the Sabbath was only, going to the synagogue or going to church was only one aspect of what they were doing accomplishing with their lives.
Yeah. I got off from the pulpit on Saturday, and one of the more mature age people in the congregation said to me, he heard once in a sermon, just a question asked, and it kind of was thought-provoking for him and for me. Like, if we need to distinguish between what's happening the other 6 days and what's happening on the seventh day, doesn't that make you ask the question, like, why are you doing those other things? Like,
doesn't it?
Yeah, like, because really, for the Christian community in the first century, the ones that knew Jesus personally, they didn't go, oh, well, Sabbath is here, we better stop, right? it was actually the few, like it just got even more important and more full on in their mission and witness, because they're like, they've been doing it all week. Here's the Sabbath. Let's keep doing it. Like it just got more exciting.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And so a quote that I got, and I'm trying to remember who said it, but the author basically said, anyone can keep the Sabbath, but it will take all week to make it holy. And I really like that. People can say, okay, I'm keeping Sabbath, but the way that we live out our life every single day will impact the way, if it's going to become something that's special and different and important to us.
So it's a really holistic approach to the Sabbath.
Yeah.
You're incorporating all the other 6 days as well into its final climax of being a good and fulfilling day.
Because let's face it, in today's culture, which is so fast-paced, and millennials being dubbed the burnout generation and all that sort of thing, we're going flat pedal the whole week, and then we get to Sabbath and we're dead. We're basically,
there's a disconnect,
right? And my question is obviously people are busy, like we can't change that, but are we busy to the point where
should we change that?
Well, I think so. I think we ought to be trying to find ways to have more Sabbath in our week. The other 6 days need a good injection of the Sabbath into them, to give that rest, impacting influence over a whole week. Because at the moment it's like we go hard out and then we die on the Sabbath, and then what for, and then just to do it again the next week.
That's a really good point.
So I think, let's get back to that more, like you said, holistic Sabbath keeping, which actually influences the way we do things the rest of the week.
Another point just to add to that, when I was a kid and growing up in a Seventh Adventist household, it was a very ritualistic thing when Sabbath came around. And as a kid, you don't understand the significance, right? Yeah. And even now, sometimes I still go back to that childhood sensibility almost, where I go, all right, Sabbath is coming. I got to put my games away. All right, as a kid, you're like, I got to put my toys away. I got to do this. I got to clean up and whatnot. And then when the Sabbath comes, it's almost like a drag, essentially. And then you just can't wait until the Sabbath is over, so you don't sin, and so you can go. You do whatever you want to do. So I can go to the movies or do whatever. And a lot of the time, talking with friends and being in situations where it's like, your sunset is coming up. It's okay. Like, it's a few minutes early, but that's all right. Like, it's almost like we lose our principles when it comes to the Sabbath. It's almost like we view the Sabbath as a drag, and as a kid, maybe it's almost understandable because kids might not understand the significance. But nowadays, I find myself doing things like that.
Yeah, and it could be easy to say like, oh man, that's like really bad, and like you don't get Sabbath. And I think we're all going to have those experiences. We're human, right? We're going to be like, oh man, Sabbath, we can't do this, can't do that. But yeah, like I'm really calling for, and this is for myself as well, really calling for a more healthier Sabbath perspective. Because when we do, we're actually going to find that we appreciate it more. And we're going to actually be looking forward to it rather than looking forward to it leaving.
So it's that paradigm shift, like we've been saying. Again, so it's more about what we should be doing than what we can't do.
And really the reason or the thing that should be like an alarm bell saying, okay, we're holding this mentality is Abraham Joshua Herschel said this interesting thing. He said that the Sabbath is actually giving us independence from work and technology. Like that's what it's actually giving to us.
Freedom.
It's freedom, right? And so it's not unusual for people who have experienced freedom to be longing for that bondage again, to go back to that older way. That's not unusual.
Relapse,
yeah. So, we're not saying that like, you got to all of a sudden give up all forms of technology.
Should we?
Well, that's some would say yes. So you can't drive a car.
But should we be changing our lives to fit the Sabbath? Should we be changing our lifestyle? I mean, we're coming up to the end of the podcast, and this is kind of like a heavy question throwing it out there, but if there's such a disconnect with our technology and Sabbath is supposed to be a freedom, should we be changing our lifestyle and our work schedule to be more, how would you say, accepting of this new piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, I don't think we stand to lose by putting away the phones and like not checking the emails for 24 hours. Like some people are still like checking their Facebook, checking their emails, checking their Instagrams, even on the Sabbath. And like, I don't think we stand to lose anything by using that time to just put away the technology. I mean, pretty much for most people, from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep, they're just attached to their phones, right? Yeah, that's, you know, that's me too. And even on the Sabbath. And I think if we
I'll be the first one
yeah. And if we really take,
I mean, it's not a good thing.
Yeah, if we really take what Herschel said seriously, he's in essence saying we have an opportunity to experience independence from that, and that would be freeing for a lot of people, liberating to a great extent. So, like, so I think like what this is bringing up is like, is this legalistic what we're talking about? And I would suggest it's not, only because legalism suggests that in order to be accepted and to be valued by God, you need to do this, this, and that, right?
But we've been saying this entire podcast, it's about having that paradigm shift.
Yeah, the paradigm shift is that, okay, you are accepted, you are loved, you have received eternity from Christ. Now here, enjoy an independent, freeing life. And the Sabbath should be constantly reinforcing that. And then, okay, so you've been saved, you've been supported, you've been lifted out of the pit of sin and out of your problems. Well, go and tell others, go and help others, and bring
Spread
healing to them. Yeah. So I think we stand to gain a lot from the Sabbath, and a lot of opportunity for independence.
Well, thank you for joining me,
Yeah,
Jacob, in this awesome discussion.
Awesome. Catch you later.